claims about an imminent Iranian missile threat hold up under closer scrutiny? That question is at the center of renewed debate about the United States intelligence sources, which indicated that there is no evidence to support assertions by President Donald Trump that Iran is on the verge of developing missiles capable of reaching the United States. This also raises fresh doubt about the urgency of the warning and the policy choices it could drive. This statement is coming as tensions of possible U.S. strike get imminent in failure of reaching a nuclear deal with Iran. As we dive into the details, this and more will be explored in today's Flash News. Good afternoon and welcome. I am Thabita Arkar. Let's begin. A claim by President Donald Trump that Iran is close to developing a missile capable of striking the United States is not supported by U.S. intelligence assessment, according to three sources familiar with the report. The assessment cast doubt on a key element of President Trump's argument for possible military action against Iran, which he raised during his State of the Union address to Congress on Tuesday. In that speech, President Trump warned that Tehran was advancing missile technology that could soon reach U.S. territory. Let's watch.
Some terrible people. They've already developed missiles that can threaten Europe and our bases overseas, and they're working to build missiles that will soon reach the United States of America. After Midnight Hammer, they were warned to make no future attempts to rebuild their weapons program, and in particular, nuclear weapons. Yet they continue starting it all over. We wiped it out, and they want to start all over again, and are at this moment again pursuing their sinister ambitions. We are in negotiations with them. They want to make a deal, but we haven't heard those secret words. We will never have a nuclear weapon. My preference
This statement was also backed by the U.S. Secretary of State, Marco Rubio. Let's watch.
Trying to achieve intercontinental ballistic missiles. For example, you've seen them try to launch the satellites into space. You've seen them increasing the range of the missiles they have now. And clearly they are headed in the pathway to one day being able to develop weapons that could reach the continental U.S. They already possess weapons that could reach much of Europe already now, as we speak. And the ranges continue to grow every single year exponentially, which is amazing to me. For a country that's facing sanctions, whose economy is in tatters, whose people are suffering, and somehow they still find the money to invest in missiles of greater and greater capacity every year. This is an unsustainable threat.
Intelligence officials, however, say there has been no change to an unclassified 2025 assessment by the U.S. Defense Intelligence Agency. The report concluded Iran could take until around 2035 to develop a militarily viable intercontinental ballistic missile based on adaptations of its existing satellite launch vehicles. Two of the sources said current intelligence findings do not indicate that Iran has accelerated its missile program beyond those projections. The White House also declined to comment on the intelligence assessment. This development coming right here from Iran as the Middle East keep gearing in based on the tensions we are seeing on ground and possible deal if that would be reached. Now, moving ahead and bringing you over to a groundbreaking development, we would say, in UK's election. Prime Minister Keir Starmer suffered a major political setback on Friday after the Green Party won a parliamentary by-election in a Manchester seat Labour had held for nearly a century, highlighting the growing fragmentation of British politics and intensifying pressure on his leadership. The loss of Gorton and Denton, one of Labour's safest constituencies, marks the party's worst electoral defeat under Starmer and comes amid weeks of internal unrest and public dissatisfaction with his government. We say that Green Party candidate Hannah Spencer won the seat vacated following the resignation of a Labour lawmaker, securing a decisive victory ahead of Nigel Farage's Reform UK party, while Labour finished a distant third. The result pushes Labour into unfamiliar territory in an area long regarded as part of its traditional Red Wall heartland and underscores the erosion of Britain's two-party dominance. Starmer had placed personal authority behind the contest, visiting the constituency and blocking a leadership rival, Manchester Mayor Andy Burham, from standing. Senior Labour figures had hoped the strategy would contain internal dissent, but the defeat instead sharpens questions over Starmer's political judgment. The by-election followed one of the most turbulent periods of Starmer's premiership, including criticism from within his own party over the appointment of veteran Labour figure Peter Mandelson as ambassador to Washington and a series of policy reversals and scandals that have weighed on his political party. Now, at the 2024 general election, Labour won more than half the votes in Gorton and Denton. On Friday, the Greens secured 40.7%, Reform UK took 28.7%, and Labour slipped to 25.4%. While governing parties often lose by elections, the scale of Labour's defeat has raised concerns ahead of May's local and regional elections in England, Scotland, and Wales, where the party is widely expected to perform poorly. The result also marks a milestone for the Green Party, which has never before won a parliamentary by-election and now holds 5 seats in the 650-member House of Commons. Analysts say the outcome reflects a broader shift in voter behavior, with declining loyalty to established parties and growing support for insurgency movement on both the left and right. National polling shows at least 5 parties attracting double-digit support, threatening the long-standing Labour Conservative duopoly. Reform UK, despite strong national polling, struggled in the ethnically diverse Manchester constituency. Comments previously made by its candidates on British Muslims appear to have alienated parts of the electorate, analysts say. But then what's the proof? Let's watch.
They don't support it either. It's a joke, isn't it? I mean, look, what you do, you get a focus group of half a dozen Reform voters in a room. The chairman says, now, what about national service? Oh, I think it's a very good idea. The rest say, yeah, actually, not a bad idea. Oh, policy. So, I mean, look, when you're a weak leader, and Sunak is not a leader in any way at all, you're a follower. So you follow what the focus groups say, and you say, by doing this, I can attack the Reform vote. That's what it's all about.
We say that Friday's results reinforces the increasingly volatile nature of British politics and leaves Starmer facing renewed scrutiny over his leadership as the country moves toward a crucial electoral year. Now, moving ahead and taking you over to a new development coming in from Canada in what we are seeing as a shift of foreign policy. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney arrives in Mumbai on Friday for his first official visit to India, aiming to repair strained diplomatic ties and deepen trade relations as Canada looks to diversify away from heavy reliance on the United States. Carney is expected to meet business leaders in Mumbai before traveling to New Delhi for talks with Narendra Modi. Discussions will focus on reviving negotiations for a comprehensive trade agreement, which Canadian officials say could be concluded by November. The visit comes as Carney pursues closer ties with India, China, and Middle Eastern countries as part of a broader effort to reshape Canada's foreign policy around cooperation among so-called middle powers. The strategy reflects growing uncertainty in global trade and heightened tensions with the U.S. Let's watch. a shared show of cooperation right there. But then let's take a journey back. Relations between Canada and India deteriorated several years ago after the previous Canadian government accused India officials of involvement in the killing of a Canadian citizen linked to separatist activism. India strongly rejected the allegations, and diplomatic ties cooled sharply. Now, this is a development that came right ahead before that preceded Canadian's Prime Minister's visit. In a notable departure from past practices, Carney will not visit India's Punjab region, a traditional stop for Canadian leaders because of the large Punjabi diaspora in Canada. Analysts see the omission as a calculated move to avoid inflaming sensitivities around Sikh separatism and to keep the focus on economic engagement. Observers say the visit underlines a more pragmatic foreign policy shaped by global trade disruptions, including tariff disputes initiated by the United States President Donald Trump and broader concerns about economic vulnerability. Canada is also seeking to capitalize on momentum created by India's recent trade agreement with the European Union. Indian officials have indicated that New Delhi is open to expanded cooperation with Ottawa, including a potential long-term uranium supply deal, an agreement covering energy, artificial intelligence, quantum computing, education, and environmental cooperation. Now, while Carney's approach has been welcomed by a lot of business leaders as a sign of renewed economic focus, some Sikh advocacy groups in Canada have criticized the government for failing to address concerns about foreign interference and diaspora security. Canadian officials say discussions with India on law enforcement cooperation and financial crime monitoring are also ongoing. After India, Carney will also travel to Australia to address Parliament and hold talks on defense and trade before stopping in Japan to discuss cooperation on automobiles, energy, and critical minerals. Now we see that history underscores Canada's efforts to strengthen partnerships across the Indo-Pacific as it adapts to shifting global order. This is development coming out. Let's take you right ahead into Africa and precisely in Kenya, following the trends of development that is happening with Russia and Ukraine, most probably taking military men from and forced people from African continent over to fight in the war. Police in Kenya have arrested a man accused of deceiving citizens into joining the war in Ukraine by offering what were presented as skilled job opportunities in Russia. Authorities said Festus Mwamba was arrested in the northern town of Moyole and later charged in Nairobi with trafficking 25 Kenyans last year. Investigators say he attempted to flee after running from Russia. Mwamba was identified by a recruit who spoke to the Associated Press after families began demanding information about a relative believed to have been sent to the front lines. The Kenyan government estimates that more than 1,000 citizens were recruited to fight for Russia. At least 89 are still on the battlefield, dozens are receiving medical treatment, 28 are unaccounted for, and one death has been confirmed. That's so sad. Now here's a statement made by Kenya's majority leader, Mimani Ichung'wah. Let's watch.
The rogue agencies are targeting ex-military, ex-police officers, as well as civilians aged between the mid-20s to 50 years, who are desperate for job opportunities abroad. The agencies have been enticing Kenyans, promising them lucrative terms of service, such as salaries of about 350,000 shillings per month, and hefty bonuses between 900,000 shillings and 1.2 million Kenya shillings, as well as eventually being issued with Russian citizenship. So far, over 1,000 Kenyans have been recruited and departed to fight in the Russia-Ukraine war. The Kenyans leave the country on tourist visas to join the Russian army through Istanbul, Turkey, as well as Abu Dhabi, United Arab Emirates. However, due to increased interception of these travelers at Jomo Kenyatta International Airport, the recruits have changed tact and are traveling through Uganda, DRC, and South Africa to avoid detection. Additionally, the agencies have been colluding with rogue airport staff. As of February 2026, the following is the status of some of the Kenyans who went to Russia. 39 are hospitalized, 30 have been repatriated, 28 are missing in action, 35 deployed in camps or bases, 89 are on the front line, 1 is detained, and 1 has completed the contract. Or bases, 89 contract.
Intelligence report also submitted to Parliament alleges that rogue recruitment agencies worked with Kenyan and Russian officials to lure citizens into the scheme. The Russian embassy has denied issuing combat visas, maintaining that foreign nationals may only enlist voluntarily. For many recruits, the promise of employment quickly collapsed. One man who later sought refuge at Kenya's embassy in Moscow said Mwamba handled visa applications and travel logistics. Another recruit said he was promised work as a plumber, only to have his passport seized and be transferred to a military camp before being deployed to the front. Officials say Mwamba's arrest represents a significant step in Kenya's effort to dismantle illegal recruitment networks and prevent further exploitation of vulnerable citizens. We would say the citizens are actually very vulnerable, just in search for greener pastures. Now, moving ahead and bringing you to disturbing concerns following the United Nations agency's breakdown of what has happened over the years with immigration. At least 7,667 people died, or rather was reported missing on migration routes around the world in 2025, according to the International Organization for Migration, which warned that the real toll is likely higher and described the losses as a global failure. Data from the agency showed the crossings of Mediterranean Sea from Africa to Europe accounted for at least 2,108 deaths. As last year, another 1,047 people died or even went missing while attempting the Atlantic route to Spain's Canary Islands. The trend has continued into 2026, and the first 2 months of the year alone, about 606 migrants' deaths were recorded on Mediterranean crossings, a figure the agency described as unprecedented for that, especially within this period. We also see that the IOM said many of the deaths could be prevented through safer and more accessible legal migration pathways. It also noted that funding cuts to aid groups, restrictions on humanitarian organizations, and limited access to reliable data are making it harder to fully document the scale of the crisis. Now, in the past 2 weeks, the remains of 23 people were discovered along southern Italian and Libyan coastlines, while hundreds more are believed to be missing at sea. Despite the grim figures, the total number of deaths fell from about 9,200 recorded in 2024. The decline was largely attributed to fewer crossing and some of the world's most dangerous routes, particularly at the US-Mexico border and through the Darien Gap, where 409 deaths were reported in 2025, which is even the lowest annual figure since 2014. And we would say maybe as a result of the immigration crackdown by the current US administration, the Trump's administration. But then this is development we're seeing right here. We'll definitely bring you up to speed with more details on Flash News. Thank you for joining. Do have a pleasant day and stay safe.